My name is Chris Sorensen, and I'm the director of the Social Sciences Academic Resource Center. I'll go ahead and have my colleague Patrick introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrick. I am the program coordinator for the Social Sciences Academic Resource Center. Nice to have you today.
Awesome. Yes. So thank you for joining us for part one of our Theory to Practice series. And ultimately, this webinar is dedicated to helping you build upon your leadership toolkit. So we're actually going to be focusing on the leader-member exchange theory today and talk about how we can use this particular theory and how you can use it in your groups, especially if you have a specific leadership position or you're going to have a specific leadership position this upcoming academic year. So let's go ahead and start. So again, leadership member exchange theory, we're just going to call it LMX for short. It's also known as the vertical dyad linkage theory. So this pretty much describes leaders and how they maintain their positions in groups and how they develop relationships with other members, and it either can contribute to growth or also hinder their development. So the model itself, and you can kind of see on the actual PowerPoint here, it consists of several didactic, which just means two-way, so you see the arrows here, relationships that connect the leader to the members. So what LMX actually suggests is that leaders automatically develop relationships with each of their members, and that quality of that relationship strongly influences the responsibility, the decision-making, and the access to resources and performance of its members. And then, so hence, because of that, oftentimes two types of groups kind of give to rise, and this can happen subconsciously or even consciously. But these two groups are the in-group, which is the middle part right here, and then the out-group itself, okay? Now, members become part of the in-group or the out-group based on how well they work with their leader or how well the leader works with them. So the in-group often has very similar personality characteristics and tend to develop like stronger relationships with the leader, allowing them to have more attention, possibly more mentorship, and just more opportunities. And then in-group members are also willing to do more than is required. So it's kind of that reciprocal relationship that they have. And they also look for innovative ways to actually advance the group as a whole. Now, the out group, on the other hand, is often characterized by more dissimilar attitudes or opinions and often contribute less and therefore get less. I don't know, Patrick, if you have anything else that you want to, before I move on to the next slide, if you wanted to add anything, feel free to do so.
One of the things that you need to be careful of, though, is that when you're looking at in-groups and out-groups, it's not just describing about personal relationships, because there are different types of work styles that people have. You can be really close to people in your group, like you can be very close to your leaders or your colleagues, but sometimes different work styles don't overlap as easily either. So when you talk about in-groups and out-groups, it's not just based on personality based, but it's also based on a work style base. So yeah, really understanding how to interact with people based on those different factors is something that you may want to consider as well.
Absolutely. And even just outside factors as well, also kind of take in consideration too. So on our next slide here, researchers actually suggest that the relationship of the leader and then the member develops progressively over time in 3 phases. And so the 3 phases are the stranger phase, the acquaintance phase, and then the mature partnership phase. So during the stranger, I keep saying phase, roles are scripted and influences are often one way, exchanges are very low quality, and interests are often in oneself. However, during the acquaintance phase, that is when roles are often tested. So meaning that let's say you have a position in a club and that particular leader or president of that club delegates some tasks. And so that's kind of when they're role assessing you and how you're doing in those particular tasks as well. And also in the acquaintance phase, influences are mixed, exchanges are often medium quality, and interests are in oneself and one another as well. And then hopefully you move on to the mature partnership phase, which roles are often negotiated, influences are reciprocal, exchanges are high quality, and interests are in the group. Patrick, anything else to add to this one?
Yeah, to kind of give an example about how this is, it's kind of like if you're brand new to a job, you often feel like you're a stranger to the person that you're working with or the group that you're in. So trying what it means by one-way scripted is that oftentimes you know exactly what your roles and responsibilities are simply just based on your job description. But as the phases tend to develop, so when you start becoming more acquainted with the job, and we're saying acquaintance not necessarily with the people, but also with the job itself, you become more attuned with what your roles and responsibilities are, where you are able to test what you're able to do and what you want to accomplish in the job as well. And so that's kind of, you can think about it in regards to like the amount of trust that you build with the people that you're working with and with the job itself. So how comfortable you get in the job and how knowledgeable you become with the job as well. Obviously, with the more knowledge, you have a lot more ability to kind of build those personal relationships with the people that you're working with first. But almost in every single new position that you're in, it's going to be new and it's going to be strange. So don't worry if you're not thinking too much about the personality part of it yet when you're in a new position, but make sure that you learn the job first, because it becomes a lot easier to develop those personal relationships later. Although some leaders actually like to do the personal thing first too sometimes, because you like to know who you're working with in the beginning, right?
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you for adding that. All right. So kind of after we've gone through this very brief overview of the actual theory itself, we hope that you can start really reflecting and maybe brainstorming on some of these other questions. So maybe thinking back in your past experiences, have you ever experienced a situation where maybe you felt placed in either the in-group or the out-group? So I think one of the most easiest ways to kind of think about this is perhaps a club that you first joined. And perhaps maybe you felt part of the out group, and then after time you became part of the in group itself. And now maybe you are in a specific leadership role. Maybe you are now overseeing an entire club or organization on campus, or even a program. As a leader, can you maybe identify who of your team members were potentially part of the out group? And maybe think about reasons about why they were maybe considered part of the out group in your eyes. And then last but not least, start thinking about, as a leader, how maybe you can use this particular theory to get the most out of all of your team members. So I've definitely experienced this personally. I know that when I, way back in the day, was going to college, I decided to join a particular club. And at that point, I was just attending meetings and I wasn't really super involved. And I would try to attend every now and then. And then I became more involved, got to know other people. The leaders started to provide me tasks, encouraging me. And I think there was definitely that growth where I felt like, yeah, I can actually, apply for that position. And then I became part of the in-group and essentially the leader that had to delegate various tasks to other people. And so it is definitely very much a process where you kind of come in and out. And then the challenge is how do we, make sure that the out group feels a part of the in group itself. I don't know, Patrick, if maybe you've had personal experience with this in the past or previously.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes there are definitely positions where you feel a lot more comfortable with the people that you work with. I can't think of one specifically, but I do know the methodology of how I work. And it kind of depends on whether you are the person who's the subordinate or if you're the person in the leadership position. So coming from a subordinate role, it's sometimes I've always found it hard to kind of break through, because if you don't see yourself kind of fitting with the current environment of the workplace, you kind of stay within that role that you kind of define for yourself. So a lot of the times it really forces you to kind of get out of your shell if you feel like it's important for you to actually break into that in group. So, because it does give you a lot more different opportunities. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to change your personality overall. It's just that you have to find that defining factor that you can kind of connect with the people who you're working with. And from there, you kind of find that common ground that makes you want to interact with them a lot more commonly. So if I'm working with somebody across campus, say for example, and we're kind of trying to collaborate on a project, oftentimes if our base personalities don't work, but we have the same exact work ethic, it's always fantastic to know that you can always reach out to that one individual. It's like, hey, like this is what we're going to be doing on our work project, and it's something that I know that we're going to do successful in. But sometimes I may not reach out to them outside of the work, which isn't a bad thing, right? Because you have to remember that when you're working with various different peoples, your definition of an in-group and an out-group can change depending on who you're working with. So it's not something that you necessarily have to force. It's not a bad thing to not be in the in-group because you may or may not fit. One of the things that people are always talking about when you're applying to jobs and whatnot is that oftentimes they're looking for people who fit within the culture. So you have to kind of understand what kinds of things are you willing to put off in your personality to fit in, but what things are you willing to hold on to, and are you going to be able to find a group of people who can actually fit into that schema of things?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why oftentimes you should be asking about what the organizational culture is like in interviews in particular. And then you could hopefully see kind of their true colors of, how everybody interacts, or, the things that they do outside of work and so on. All right, so moving on to the next slide. So I think the biggest question here is, why should LMX be a part of your leadership toolkit? So ultimately, LMX suggests that it's important to be able to recognize the existence of in-groups and out-groups within a group or an organization. And leaders should also try to create special relationships with all of its members, so in-group and out-group. And then, of course, there's always going to be criticisms when it comes to various theories as well. And one of the criticisms of LMX is that it fails to explain how quality exchanges are actually created. So we were able to outline a few tips to kind of provide you in order to develop these high quality exchanges. And that includes communication, personalization, support, and even fairness with your members. So for example, we definitely encourage you to kind of work on your relationships by speaking to each of your team members personally and being able to give them that personal attention that they need. Another thing is really taking your time to discover like what specifically do they enjoy about the organization, or in particular their actual position, maybe why they applied to become a member, or why did they even join in the first place. And then also maybe what are their personal goals? What do they hope to get out of their experience? And maybe what you can do to kind of help make their responsibilities either more challenging or easier, or more worthwhile to be able to help them achieve their particular goals. Another tip is to be able to kind of provide enough sufficient training and development opportunities, and just be open to feedback in both directions. So being able to provide feedback to the member and being able to receive feedback. In terms of training, maybe you want to put on a retreat during the summer to get ready for the academic year. Let's say if you were in an organization or a club, or if you maybe in the future are in a management position, overseeing employees, being able to provide the opportunity for them to go to conferences or professional development opportunities as well. And then last but not least, be sure to divide tasks with kind of a high level of freedom and responsibility and equally among members. And don't just automatically give a certain person kind of preferential treatment when others might just be as capable to do the task and to get the job done as well. Patrick, any other tips or advice that we can kind of give to everyone here?
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty good summary. This just reminded me of another leadership theory that all of you may want to consider looking at, something called situational theory, which basically puts all of the suggestions that Carissa described here into a chart that kind of describes what you're supposed to do as a leader. Because your employees or your subordinates are going to be in very different parts of knowledge base when it comes to these types of things. So knowing exactly how to interact with your subordinates, regardless of whether they're part of the in-group or the out-group, is going to definitely change. And really, it does boil down to a lot of different communication and making sure that everyone feels fair. And this is actually, I'll describe a concept from IO psychology where really your main goal as a manager or a leader is to make sure that everyone who's working under you feels that they are highly supported, that they know that you have their interests in mind and that you are trying to make them be as happy in the position as possible. But at the same time, personality does get in the way sometimes, but definitely something that you should really consider.
Absolutely. Thank you. So last but not least, we do want to kind of share with you that if you are kind of ready to talk a little bit more about how to really bolster and enhance your leadership skills, feel free to schedule an appointment with us. We'd like to talk to you kind of where you're at right now and kind of where you want to go, whether if you want to get involved more on campus and try to find various leadership opportunities, either in the School of Social Sciences or just on campus. We can certainly help point you in the right direction. Oftentimes, I mean, Patrick and I are certainly involved in a lot of various different programs within the School of Social Sciences, and we are, we do have our part in actually interviewing candidates and, picking kind of best of the best when it comes to that. And so if you need any assistance with kind of interviewing various leadership positions, we can also provide you guidance there. And then just other friendly reminders, if you just want to reach out to us, you can always email us at ssarc.socsci.uci.edu or follow us on Instagram and Facebook. So right now we actually have some time for questions. So if any of you have various questions, feel free to put it in the chat function. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen, or the Q&A function. Maybe if you have any questions about personal experiences that you've had with other group members in your club or organization, or maybe at an internship, maybe questions on like, how do I go about in approaching this really difficult situation, whatever it might be. I think we might, let's see, do we have any questions? Nope. Yeah. Anyways, and just kind of another friendly reminder, there is part 2 of this series where we're going to be discussing another theory. Patrick, do you want to share what the next theory is?
Yeah, the next theory is actually going to be based on charisma and how to be a charismatic leader. Oftentimes when we think about charisma, we think about just somebody who's really active and somebody who seems like you really want to follow them. But charisma is not only just about the way that you present yourself, but the words that you use, the actions that you have, and just how you regularly interact with the people that you lead. So we'll go into much better detail about that in the following week, where you can kind of learn about how to get people to kind of be on board with your ideas and how to kind of convince them to be part of your team. So that's what we're going to talk about for next week.
Yeah. And then another really exciting thing, and again, like I said, feel free to ask any questions, and even if they're not even about this theory and then completely something off topic, that's cool too. But SARC is actually going to be kind of putting on a leadership development program this upcoming fall. And so there's going to be more information to come through the SARC newsletter if that's something that you want to get involved in. And there is an actual certificate that you can complete as being part of the program if you complete all the workshops. And it's going to be kind of similar to this, talking about theories and just talking about, other ways that you can kind of bolster your leadership presence and your experience and skills as well. But any other things you want to add on about the leadership development consortium program?
No, I mean, I think that's a pretty good summary about what our leadership is going to look like.
All right, awesome. Well, if there's no other questions, then I guess we can go ahead and end our time together. So we just want to thank you so much. And again, if you do have any questions after this session, just go ahead and send us an email and we're happy to help you out. Thank you so much and take care.
Hi, everyone.